The moment I arrived at Lake Regia, the sight of the church steeple rising eerily from the water sent a chill down my spine. It was both haunting and fascinating, a stark reminder of the village that lay beneath the surface. I'd heard the stories, whispers of strange occurrences, of divers who'd felt something watching them from the shadows, but I brushed them off. Superstitions, I told myself, nothing more. Gazing out over the still, dark waters, I felt a thrill of excitement. This was exactly the kind of mystery I lived for. I geared up, the familiar weight of the diving equipment bringing a sense of comfort and control. With one last look at the steeple, I plunged into the lake, eager to uncover the secrets below. As I descended, the world above faded quickly. The light grew dimmer, the temperature dropped, and the water seemed to close in around me, muffling all sound. My breaths echoed loudly in my ears, the only noise in an otherwise silent world. The further I went, the darker it became, until I was enveloped in a cold, inky blackness. There was no turning back now. I was committed to finding whatever lay beneath, even if the abyss itself seemed to resist my intrusion. Deeper into the lake, the murky darkness began to give way to the outlines of the village below. My heart raced as the first building came into view. A small stone house, perfectly preserved as if time had forgotten it. As I descended further, more structures emerged from the gloom, their windows staring back at me like hollow eyes. The village was eerily intact. Houses stood firm, their doors slightly ajar, revealing glimpses of the rooms inside. I could see furniture still in place, tables set as if for a meal, chairs pulled back, a child's toy lying on the floor. It was as though the residents had left in a hurry, or perhaps they'd never left at all. The sight sent a shiver through me. It was one thing to know about the sunken village, but another entirely to see it, frozen in time beneath the water. I swam through the narrow streets, my movements slow and cautious. The stillness was unnerving, the silence heavy and unnatural, as if the water itself held its breath. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something, a flicker of movement in one of the windows. I turned quickly, but there was nothing there. Just shadows, I told myself, tricks of the light. But as I continued, the sense of unease grew. The shadows seemed to dart between the buildings, too quick to catch, but always just at the edge of my vision. And then I heard it, a faint, muffled sound, like distant voices carried on the current. It was impossible, yet unmistakable. I paused, my breath catching in my throat, listening intently. The voices were low, indecipherable, but they filled the silence with a dreadful weight. A chill crept over me, colder than the water around me. I wasn't alone down here. Something was watching, waiting, hidden within the depths of the sunken village. I pressed on, deeper into the heart of the sunken village, but with each stroke, the water seemed to thicken around me, resisting my movements like a heavy, suffocating embrace. The temperature dropped further, the cold seeping through my wet suit, chilling me to the bone. The once faint shadows now moved with purpose, slipping between the buildings, growing more defined with every passing moment. The voices I'd heard earlier were no longer distant whispers. They had grown louder, more insistent, as if they were following me, surrounding me. I couldn't make out any words, just a chorus of low, eerie murmurs that set my nerves on edge. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, to swim as fast as I could toward the surface, but something stronger, a deep, unrelenting curiosity, pushed me forward. The village felt less like a relic of the past and more like a place still inhabited, but by what I couldn't say. The buildings, once simply eerie, now seemed to pulse with a dark energy, as if the village itself was alive, aware of my presence. As I passed a half-collapsed house, I glanced inside and saw what looked like the shadow of a figure standing just beyond the doorway. I froze, heart pounding in my chest, but when I looked again, it was gone, leaving only the faint echo of those disembodied voices. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming now, an oppressive weight that bore down on me from all sides. It was as if the village had awakened, disturbed by my intrusion, and was now closing in, trapping me within its grasp. The water grew colder still, almost painfully so, and the darkness seemed to press in, reducing the beam of my flashlight to a mere flicker. Panic gnawed at the edges of my mind, but I forced it back, telling myself that I'd come too far to turn around now. I needed to see this through, to uncover the secrets hidden beneath the lake's surface. But with every stroke, my dread grew, until I was no longer certain if it was my own fear driving me forward, or something far more sinister, luring me deeper into the sunken village's embrace. I reached the sunken church, its steeple a dark silhouette above me, piercing through the murky water like a ghostly beacon. The structure loomed larger as I approached, its doors hanging open, inviting yet foreboding. My flashlight flickered, casting long shadows across the ancient stone. I hesitated, a deep sense of dread washing over me, but I had to know what lay inside. As I swam through the doorway, the water grew impossibly thick, like moving through molasses. Inside the church, the light from my flashlight barely penetrated the darkness, but I could make out shapes. Figures standing in a circle, their faces obscured by the gloom. They weren't human, not entirely. Their forms were shadowy, indistinct, but all of them turned to face me as I entered, as if they had been waiting. Panic surged through me. I tried to swim backward, to escape, but the water clung to me, heavy and unyielding. The figures began to move closer, their presence suffocating, pressing in on me from all sides. I struggled, my heart pounding in my chest, but I couldn't break free. The last thing I saw was the church steeple above, eerily lit from below, before unseen forces dragged me into the abyss. My screams were muffled by the water, the sound swallowed by the depths as darkness consumed me. The last thing I felt was cold, crushing pressure, and then nothing. Later, my gear would be found washed up on the shore, but of me there was no trace, just another soul claimed by the village. The submersible hummed quietly as we descended into the Mariana Trench, the world above fading into a distant memory. Outside, the light from the surface quickly vanished, leaving us in a vast, overwhelming darkness. The only illumination came from the soft glow of our instruments, casting eerie shadows across the cramped interior of the vessel. With every meter we dropped, the pressure mounted, a constant reminder of the crushing depths that surrounded us. But instead of fear, I felt a thrill unlike anything I'd ever known. This was the frontier, the edge of the unknown. The trench held secrets that had remained hidden for millions of years, and we were the first to venture this deep in search of them. I could feel the weight of the ocean pressing in, but it only sharpened my focus, my excitement growing with each tick of the depth gauge. The rest of the team was quiet, their faces a mix of concentration and unease. I could tell they felt the tension too, the oppressive atmosphere creeping into the sub. But all I could think about was what lay ahead. New species, ancient mysteries, perhaps even answers to questions we hadn't thought to ask yet. The abyss was calling, and I was ready to answer. At a depth no human had ever reached, our instruments picked up something unexpected. A massive void in the trench wall. The pilot angled the submersible's lights toward the anomaly, and there it was. A cavern, enormous and hidden deep within the abyss. My heart skipped a beat as the beam of light revealed its entrance, the darkness inside almost swallowing the glow entirely. This was no ordinary discovery. As we cautiously approached, the walls of the cavern came into view, and what I saw took my breath away. They were covered in strange, bioluminescent organisms that pulsed with a soft, eerie light. The glow wasn't just random. It moved in waves, as if responding to some unseen rhythm. The light cast the cavern in an otherworldly hue, painting everything in shades of green and blue, shadows dancing across the interior as if alive. But it wasn't just the light that held my attention, it was the patterns. Strange, intricate symbols were etched into the stone, almost hidden among the glowing organisms. They seemed deliberate, like the markings of an ancient civilization or a language lost to time. My pulse quickened. This was more than just a natural phenomenon. It felt like a message, a secret waiting to be uncovered. Marley, we need to proceed with caution. The team leader's voice crackled in my earpiece, filled with concern. This place, it's not on any charts. We don't know what we're dealing with. But his warning only fueled my curiosity. The thrill of discovery, of being the first to witness something this extraordinary, was too powerful to resist. I steered the submersible deeper into the cavern, my eyes fixed on the glowing walls, the symbols drawing me in like a siren's call. This was what I had been searching for. A chance to uncover something truly groundbreaking, something that could change everything we thought we knew about the ocean's depths. I had to see more, no matter the risk. The deeper I ventured into the cavern, the more surreal everything became. The bioluminescent lights that had initially guided me started to flicker erratically, plunging the submersible into near-total darkness before blinking back to life in unpredictable patterns. Each time the lights went out, the darkness was absolute, a suffocating void that pressed in from all sides. The cavern walls seemed to pulse, as if the entire space was alive, breathing in sync with some deep, unseen force. Suddenly, the instruments in front of me began to malfunction. The depth gauge spun wildly, the sonar returned distorted echoes, and the temperature readings fluctuated without reason. A sense of unease crept in, replacing the excitement that had driven me this far. I tapped the controls, trying to steady the readings, but they remained erratic, as if the submersible itself was becoming disoriented. "Marley, do you copy? Marley!" The team leader's voice crackled through the earpiece, but his words were garbled, barely comprehensible. Static drowned out most of the message, leaving only fragments of warnings and commands. The connection to the surface was breaking down, and with it, the safety net that had tethered me to the world above. A cold, unsettling sensation began to settle over me, an awareness that I was no longer alone. The water outside felt different, heavier, almost oppressive, as if something immense was displacing it, watching me from just beyond the edge of the lights. I peered into the darkness, straining to see past the flickering glow, but there was nothing, just an overwhelming sense of presence. The organisms on the cavern walls, once merely fascinating, now seemed to pulse with a purpose, their glow synchronizing in waves that matched the pounding of my heart. They weren't just reacting to the environment. They were responding to something or someone deeper within the trench. The realization hit me like a physical blow. These creatures weren't passive. They were part of something larger, something ancient and powerful, and I had intruded into their domain. My pulse quickened as dread settled in. This wasn't just a scientific expedition anymore. It was something far more dangerous. I tried to reverse the submersible, to pull back from the depths, but the controls felt sluggish, unresponsive, as if the water itself was resisting my escape. The flickering lights began to fail entirely, leaving me trapped in the inky darkness, with only the unsettling feeling that whatever was down here with me had finally noticed my presence. The submersible drifted into the heart of the cavern, where an immense, alien-like structure loomed out of the darkness. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Twisted and otherworldly, its surface covered in strange, pulsating patterns that seemed almost alive. Surrounding it were bones, skeletal remains of creatures so massive and bizarre that they defied all known biology. Some were easily 3 times the size of any sea life I'd studied, their twisted forms a chilling testament to whatever force had claimed them. I approached cautiously, the submersible's lights flickering as if in fear. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, but I couldn't. The sheer scale of the discovery pulled me in, even as dread clawed at my mind. As I drew closer, the ground beneath the submersible began to tremble, the rocks shifting as if the very earth was waking up. Then, from the heart of the structure, a massive eye opened, filling my entire view. It was ancient, filled with a malevolent intelligence that sent a jolt of terror through me. The eye locked onto me, and I felt its gaze pierce through the submersible, freezing me in place. The structure around it began to crumble, as if my presence had triggered something catastrophic. The water churned, the pressure crushing, and I realized with horrifying clarity that I had awakened something that was never meant to be disturbed. Panic overtook me. I tried to turn the submersible around, to flee, but it was too late. The darkness rushed in, swallowing everything. My desperate screams were muffled by the crushing water. The last sounds I made before the abyss consumed me entirely. The submersible systems failed, and contact with the surface was lost, leaving the mystery of the abyss and my fate forever unsolved.
As we descended into the depths of the Bermuda Triangle, the excitement in the sub was palpable. The wreck had been a mystery for decades, a massive freighter that had simply vanished without a trace. Now, here it was, lying eerily intact on the ocean floor, a ghost ship waiting to be explored. My heart raced with anticipation. This was the kind of discovery I lived for, the chance to uncover secrets lost to time and the sea. The water around us grew colder, darker, as if the ocean itself was warning us away. The sunlight from above faded into nothing, leaving only the sub's lights to cut through the inky blackness. And then, like a shadow materializing from the abyss, the ship came into view. It was enormous, looming beneath us like a forgotten giant. Its silhouette was ghostly, the details of its structure blurred by the murky water. We hovered above the deck, the scale of the freighter taking my breath away. It was as if the ship had been frozen in time, waiting for us to disturb its slumber. There was a sense of foreboding in the stillness, a warning that this place was not meant to be disturbed. But the thrill of the unknown pushed those thoughts aside. We were here to uncover the truth, and I was ready to dive into the mysteries this ship had buried for so long. We entered the freighter through a gaping hole in its side, our lights sweeping across the interior as we moved through the murky water. The first thing that struck me was how unervingly preserved everything was. The dining hall was just as it must have been decades ago. Tables set with plates, silverware neatly arranged, chairs pushed back as if the crew had just finished a meal. In the crew quarters, beds were made, belongings scattered about like the owners had stepped out for a moment. It was as if time had simply stopped. But there was something wrong. Something deeply unsettling about the stillness that filled the ship. The air, or rather the water, felt thick with an unnatural quiet, like the ship was holding its breath, waiting. My heartbeat echoed in my ears, unnervingly loud in the silence. As we ventured deeper, the strange occurrences began. I heard it first, faint footsteps echoing through the corridors, but when I turned, no one was there. Then, doors creaked open as we passed, moving slowly on their rusted hinges, as if nudged by an unseen hand. The worst was the whispers, just on the edge of hearing, muffled by the water but unmistakable. It felt as though the ship was trying to speak, to warn us, or perhaps lure us further in. A heavy sense of dread settled over us, growing with each step. The thrill of discovery was slowly giving way to fear, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not welcome here, that something was watching us, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. As we ventured deeper into the freighter, the sense of unease grew into something darker. The dim lights from our helmets flickered, casting eerie shadows that seemed to move at the edge of my vision. I tried to convince myself it was just the play of light in the murky water, but the shadows felt wrong, too deliberate, too alive. The whispers, once faint, now surrounded us, growing louder and more insistent, as if the ship itself was trying to communicate, or perhaps warn us. The others felt it too. The chatter over the comms had dwindled, replaced by tense silence and the occasional muttered curse. The excitement that had fueled our dive was fading, replaced by a creeping fear that none of us wanted to voice. Equipment began to malfunction. Oxygen readings fluctuated, and our lights dimmed unexpectedly. Worse, communication with the surface became sporadic, the voices of our support team breaking up into static before cutting out entirely. Something was very wrong here. The ship, once a marvel of engineering, now felt like a living thing, its corridors twisting and turning as if trying to confuse us, separate us. I noticed the team drifting apart, drawn by strange noises or unexplained movements in the dark. I wanted to shout for everyone to stick together, but the words caught in my throat, stifled by the oppressive atmosphere that hung heavy in the water. I felt a pull toward the heart of the ship, an inexplicable urge to go deeper, despite the growing dread. The air, or rather the water, grew thicker, heavier, as if infused with a malevolence that seeped into my bones. The further we went, the more I sensed that we were not alone. The ship wasn't empty. It was waiting, watching, and I was no longer sure we'd be able to leave once it decided to reveal itself. Panic flickered at the edges of my mind, but I pressed on, drawn by that dark curiosity that had brought me here in the first place. But now, every step felt like a descent into something far worse than just the cold, dark depths of the ocean. We were being led somewhere, and whatever was guiding us had no intention of letting us go. I finally reached the captain's cabin, my heart pounding in my chest. The door creaked open as I approached, revealing a room frozen in time. Papers were scattered across the desk, and the captain's log lay open, its pages yellowed and brittle. I hesitated before picking it up, dread coiling in my gut. The entries started normally, recounting the ship's journey, but soon they took a darker turn. The captain wrote of strange occurrences, crew members hearing voices, seeing shadows that shouldn't have been there. Paranoia had spread like a disease, turning the men against each other. The final entries were frantic, almost illegible, describing something hunting them, something they couldn't see but felt closing in. As I read the last desperate words, the ship suddenly lurched, throwing me against the wall. The lights flickered and died, plunging the room into darkness. Panic surged through me as I fumbled for my flashlight. When it flickered on, ghostly figures began to materialize around me, their eyes hollow, filled with anger and despair. They moved closer, their forms shifting in the dim light. The ship groaned, the sound of metal twisting under immense pressure. I could feel it sinking, the water already flooding the corridors, rising fast. I turned to flee, but the spirits blocked my path, their cold ethereal hands reaching out. My flashlight flickered again as the water surged around my ankles, then my knees. The last thing I heard was the groaning of the ship as it settled deeper into the abyss, the cold dark water closing over me, pulling me down into its watery grave.